Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. So I was thinking about doing a video on the various types of locks used on knives, and this was inspired by the open tag going around about lockbacks, and I will be doing that video on the various types of locks that are used on knives other than lockbacks, and also probably liner locks. Those are two very common ones. But when I started thinking about the lockbacks, I started wondering, when I started thinking about the lockbacks, it's like, okay, we know that a lockback is when the lock is along the back spring of the knife. But we have that lock in numerous places. Like on the Buck 110, it is all the way at the back end of the knife. Here we have a Frost Vulture 2. It just happens to be the one that I have. You notice now it's not really at the end of the knife. It's further back, but it's not all the way back. And then here we have the Robin 2, and this one is right in the middle, and it's often referred to as a mid-lock, and this is referred to as a back lock. And then on the stiletto, it's kind of a back lock, but it's before the end of the bolster. Notice how this is actually cut into the bolster, and it's a bump out. So not your typical way that people think of when they see the back lock. So this is considered a stiletto lock back, because this is the way most stilettos end up having the lock on the back there? Or is this what at one time it was referred to as a pin lock, because the lock is actually on the blade here. If you notice, see the bump here? That's referred to as the pin, and it goes through the hole here. And that's really what is locking it, is the pinhole. You know, so do we still just refer to a stiletto as a pin lock, or is it a type of lockback? You know, just one of those questions that kind of bother me. So we know that all of these are lockbacks, but I've often heard this referred to as a back lock, and this is a mid lock. So are those basically different types of lockbacks? And do we have similar things going on with other locks? I don't know. Just throwing that out there. With that said, let's move on to the various other kinds of locks that you see on knives. So here we have a liner lock on a fish knife. This is an Army Air Force fish knife from World War II. And the liner lock kind of bulges up a little bit, comes across, and interferes so that the blade will not shut. And this is a very old style of liner lock. Matter of fact, I believe it was patented in 1905. It might have been even earlier than that, but liner locks were definitely around all the way to the late 19th century. It is not something new, the idea of a liner lock. This version was around at least since 1905, and is still used today, at least in traditional pattern knives. What you also run into with liner locks is what you see here on this Artisan Corsair, which works with a detent also. So there's a detent to hold the blade in place. Press on the flipper. So the detent is actually locking the blade too, is what I'm trying to point out. Press on the flipper, the blade comes open, and then the liner lock slides across to stop the blade from closing. Really, you press on the liner lock. Notice now we have a little cutout on the handle, so the liner does not interfere with the gripper anyway. You press across and the blade closes. We are all very familiar with liner locks, but that's basically the two you kind of encounter. This one actually catches the blade on top, comes across and catches the blade on top. This one catches the blade from behind. The other style of kind of a liner lock, but not truly a liner lock, is the frame lock. And these are a little more heavy duty. This is on a Colt. I don't like frame locks, but this one's a little bit better than a lot of them you see. Most of them have the cutout on the outside, so it even looks uglier, but at least this one has the cutout on the inside. And again, what it does is it slides across and catches the blade at the backside, so it will not close, and then you have a little jimping there so you can actually grab onto it and close it. Being left-handed, the frame locks often will get in my way. That's probably why I do not have many of them. Also, you have that very thin spot right there, so to me, they're not as good of a lock as they pretend to be. I think a liner lock is almost just as good, if not in some cases better, depending on how thick the liner lock is. And from what I understand, and there have been many tests that have shown that basically the back lock or lockback tends to hold up better than either the frame lock or the liner lock in numerous tests that have been done. However, any lock will fail if you put enough pressure on it. And for most chores, any of these locks will work. The back lock, the mid lock, frame lock, liner lock, all of these will work just fine. For most things that you're doing, you really have to apply a lot of pressure for them to close. But with that said, let's move on beyond the most common locks that you run into, which tend to be the liner lock, frame lock, and some form of lock back. Now for this first one I'm going to show you, I think a lot of people are going to go, no, nope, 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 that is not a lock, that is not a lock. But it is actually a style of lock on traditional knives, and it is also the most common style of lock you're going to run into on traditional knives these days, and that is basically your slip joint, your typical slip joint back spring. And it does indeed lock the blades. I have proof by turning this knife upside down, and none of the blades move. They do not fall open. So it is definitely locking the blade closed. When I open the blade stays in place, and that is because of the tension on the back spring against the blade. I have to apply pressure for it to close. Now this, if you do any kind of twisting or if you press down, it is more likely to fail or close on you, but the back spring is acting as a lock on the blade. And we know that because when I'm using this blade, all the other blades are staying closed. It stays where I want it to be. If I have it open a certain length, the blade will close because of the tension on the back spring. So your typical slip joint back spring is the lock on the blade. It is just not a strong lock. It doesn't have the tension, or it is not interfering with the closing of the blade, as in blocking its path in some way. The lockback interferes with the closing. It catches the blade somehow to prevent it from closing. It adds a little more tension to it in some way. Liner locks, they slide across somehow to block the paths to prevent the knife from closing. But a tensioned back spring will also keep that blade from closing, and it does not close easily. It requires pressure in order to close. So the back spring on your slip joint is the lock. It's just not the strongest lock in the world. But when you think about it, your typical back spring on a slip joint is the locking mechanism. So the slip joint lock is the back spring. Now, before the slip joint, we had basically what was a friction folder, and friction held the knife closed. I can loosen this up. Let's grab a screwdriver here. Is that tightening it or lefty-loosey? Notice how the blade drops. It's not tight. If I tighten it up a bit, the blade remains in place a little bit better. So friction is acting as the lock to keep this blade closed. You have the extended tang here, and that is what acts as the lock to hold the blade open. So it's actual pressure on the back of the tang here, the extended tang, that keeps the blade open. Will it give? You move your hand out of the way and definitely it will give. The other way you can also secure this, if you wanted to, if you're going to be using it for an extended period of time and you did not want to hold it all the time or get a different grip way back here, you could actually tie some cord around it to hold the blade open. So you can, or you can also try and tighten it up a little bit more when you have it all the way open, and that will help keep the blade from closing on you. So the extended tang on a friction folder, as well as the pivot tightening up the pivot point, will act as the lock on your friction folder. So two traditional kind of knives that lock in a different way than what we're used to, but they are still blades that lock, just not in the sense that we usually think about. So that is another locking mechanism that is a little outside the normal thought process of locking knives. So I should also mention that, so while these might be locking knives of a sense, both are considered legal to carry. Well, if this had a shorter blade, it would be legal to carry in the United Kingdom. These two kinds of knives do have fewer restrictions put upon them than almost any other kind of knife. Any other knife that has some kind of locking mechanism, for instance, a liner lock, a lockback, both of those would be considered illegal to carry in any place that has locking restrictions. Some major cities in the United States, the United Kingdom, and a few other places in the world. But because these do not have, I guess you could say, a true lock on the blade, they're not illegal to carry. Now, here is another friction folder that does have restrictions on it in places like the United Kingdom, because it has what's known as a collar lock. And this is the Open L. We're all very familiar with it, I think. It is basically a friction folder, though. There's really no spring on this at all. And the only thing that holds the blade closed is friction. It doesn't drop open, but it can wear over time to the point where the blade becomes a little loose. But with the collar, you just turn the collar and the blade is stuck. It won't fall open by accident. Slide it over, open it up, turn the collar, and now the blade will not close. So the blade locks open by use of a collar lock. And it's a very effective lock, and has been around for, what, at least 100 years or so, maybe even longer than that. So the Open L collar lock is quite popular among quite a few people. Here's a locking mechanism that I have shown before. This is known as a back spring lock. This is on a little Steel Warrior copperhead. These were actually used on early electrician knives. And if you notice, nothing is showing that this is locked, except the blade will not close. It's not a trick or anything. The secondary blade here acts as a lever that pushes against the back spring and releases the main blade. So if we press down on that, you notice that it gives away, and now I can close the blade. Now the secondary blade does not have the same benefit. This blade will close by itself. The only blade that has the lock is the main blade. But that's known as a back spring lock. And it was fairly common back in the 1910s, 1920s to make knives like this. Like I said, early electricians' knives used this system where the screwdriver was locked open by the main blade. So it's just kind of the opposite of what you're seeing here. But that is the back spring lock, which is kind of an interesting one and you don't see too often these days. Now, if you call, a little while ago I was talking about the pin lock that you have on the stiletto here, where you have this nub here that comes through the hole here and locks the blade in place, and you have to press down back here in order to break it free. Well, that is kind of carried over into Lockweil knives. If you notice here, can you see it? Let's see if we can, you can see it a little bit. You got that nub there. It's not as pronounced as what you're seeing on the stiletto here, but there is definitely a nub there. And you notice in the B, there is no hole going through the B, but there is a recess underneath the B, and that nub actually catches onto that. And because of that, you have the back spring action here. And when you can kind of see the cut right there. Can you see it right there in the behind the B? This is going to lock into that. It'll snap around and then go into that place, and that adds a little more tension to the blade, and means that you have to press harder to break it free, because this is also working off of back spring too. So you've got that little bit of extra tension going on. While it doesn't go all the way through the B, it is catching underneath there. It is rounded a little bit, but you have to add a little bit extra pressure to break free before you can close. And depending on what Lockweil you're using, that tension may be stronger or less. A proper Lockweil though will have that, and you will feel that break when you're pushing down. You'll feel the initial break as it frees itself from the B. And you'll find that on expensive Lockweils as well as less expensive Lockweils. And it is one of those extra features that people kind of miss. So it's kind of, I've heard it described as described as a Lockweil lock. I've also heard it described as a half lock, because it doesn't lock nearly as tightly, and you can close it by hand without pressing on anything. But it is an additional safety feature on the knife, that little nub on the pivot point there, right there. So that's another locking feature. And if you're familiar with the Okapi, you'll see that it also has that little nub up there. It also ratchets around, so it has a couple different safety features going on. And you have the ring pull here, and that's to break free that lock. And you'll see the hole here. So it's kind of like what you have on with the stilettos and such, where you have the pen lock here. And this one ratchets around. That's another safety feature that they've set in place. But the very last one pushes that nub through the hole, and you have to release it by pressing down on or pulling on the back spring. This is an external back spring too. Pull on that, break it free, and then you can ratchet it back around. You can also find those on this knife. This here is not an external back spring, but it works in the same way. It's got a ring lock here. You see the nub right there. You open it up. This one does not ratchet, but it closes in there. It locks. You cannot press down on it and free it. You actually have to pull on the ring to release it, and then you can close it. So that's another style of lock. The ring lock is usually, I think, what it is called, or a ring release lock. A little different than the collar lock there. Actually quite a bit different than a collar lock. So let me put that there too. That should bring us to, as long as we're looking at those, let's take a look at another one here. As long as we're looking at pin locks, here we have one on what would be kind of considered the classic Italian switchblade, even though this one is made in China, I think. But you see the pinhole there is similar to what you see on a stiletto. You have a button release on the blade, so it's an automatic knife. Locks in place. There is no, the button does not free it. That's just gets the blade out there. What actually releases this one is the bolster. So it's a bolster lock or bolster release. It's actually a pin lock, but it's a bolster release on it. Press down on the bolster, which pushes up on the pan here, which would be considered the B on a look wheel. That frees the blade, so you can then return the blade to the closed position. And this is the lock on it to make it safe to close. As I've mentioned in a couple other videos, right now this blade is under tension. So if you're going to store your switch blades for a long time, my advice is always to store them open so that the blade is not under tension, or at least the spring for the knife is not under tension. And that will extend the longevity of the spring, the opening spring on your switchblade. Let's move on to another one here. Okay, I have no idea what kind of lock I would consider this, and I guess most people would not even consider it a lock, but it does lock the blade in place in both the safe position and the open position. And that is some kind of swivel going on here, where you swivel this around and then you swivel this, and then the blade is exposed. And when you're holding it, the knife cannot close. It can move around a little bit, but it's pretty much set in position. So what you would call that, do you consider it a lock or not? It is a method of, it's definitely a folding knife, and it is a method of keeping the blade safe in the closed position, but available and no chance of it folding in the using position. So as long as you're holding the knife, it's not going to close on you. So kind of I don't have a clue what you would call it other than like a swivel. You do run across these. They were, well, as you can see with this one, this was used for advertising and such. It's kind of a novelty, I guess, but it is another way of locking that blade open so you can use it without worrying about it closing on you. Speaking of a unique thought on locking a blade open and then having it closed in a funky way, I don't know what you would call this one either, because the blade is now in the closed position. It is in the handle, like you see with so many other knives here. And what you do is you pull this open. Let's see. Blade is out. Turn it around, slide it down. Blade is ready to be used. This is some kind of fish knife. It was actually patented in not only Great Britain but the United States. It was actually made in Hong Kong. I guess it's a type of barrel knife. I think, is it a Swedish barrel knife that basically where you turn the knife blade into the handle and then you twist it down with the cap or something like that. But it's kind of a style of barrel knife, I guess, and not typically what you think of with as a lock, but it does work to a degree. It's not going to close on you. It's not going to fold on you. It's pretty snug in there, so if it does come loose, it's not going to be coming loose and into you. It'll be stuck in something. You know, I guess if you were to get this stuck in something and pull it out, it would still be stuck in something. So that would be an interesting thought. But anyway, a weird version of a barrel knife, I think, is what I would consider this one. But it is safe to carry when it's in the locked positions as such. So going back to the ring locks here, the ring locks were replaced with a lever, such as what you're seeing here on this Joker Navaja Sevillana. And what you have here is a lever that is going to release the little pin or notch in the blade here. So when you open this up, I know everyone's like, it should ratchet. Well, they don't always ratchet, mainly because of legal issues in Spain these days. But when you bring it around, it locks into the hole down below the lever, and instead of pulling up on a pin, you have a little lever that you push on, and that will bring up this back spring enough to release it out of the hole, and then you can close the blade. So it's not held in place with anything other than friction when closed, but when in use, you hear that definitive snap into the hole, and now the blade is locked and will not close. It's a very strong lock on there. Break it loose and you can close it back down. Here's another version of that. This is in a relatively inexpensive Canon knife, and Canon was a product, I believe, of Smoky Mountain Knife Works. I think they held the trademark for the name when these were made. But it swings around, you see it coming up, and then it'll lock and it doesn't move. And then on this case, you pull back on the lever and it frees it up and you can close it. It's an old Spanish design. And let's see, a couple more locks. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of knife locking mechanisms. Please join me in a few days with part 2 of knife locking mechanisms. See you soon. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.